On Tech News Today, we'll take a look inside Facebook's data science lab and tell you what they've been doing for the last couple of years. Plus, trouble ahead for the global internet, more details on Microsoft's smartwatch, and the end is near on the world's best quality TV sets. Stick around. Tech News Today is next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, July 3rd, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Personal Capital. With Personal Capital, you'll finally have all your financial life in one place and get a clear view of everything you own. Best of all, it's free. To sign up, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. And by ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter makes hiring faster, easier, and cheaper. Post your job to 50-plus job boards with one click. Try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgan. Jason Howell is off, and Anthony Nielsen is filling in. Our co-anchor today is Elise Hugh, coming to us live from Jamaica. Welcome, Elise.
Thank you, Mike. Every once in a while, you'll see the breeze sort of just blow my hair back. It's a really nice effect.
You know,
there it went.
There was. Leo's in Hawaii. You're in Jamaica. This is just the world is not a fair place. So you're there having a good time, and I appreciate you Skyping in to do the show today. I think this is the first time anybody has come in from Jamaica. We've talked to people in Rwanda, all over Europe, Beijing, all over the world, but never Jamaica. So you're making history here today.
I'm a real trendsetter, Mike.
That's right. You can't help it. What are you going to do? Well, let's jump into the news. Facebook's controversial study on whether mood is contagious on social networks is just one of the many conducted by Facebook's data science group, according to an article published this morning in the Wall Street Journal and written by Reed Albergotti. Reed joins us today, and we also have Jules Polonetsky, who is the executive director of the Future of Privacy Forum. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Reed, now you opened your piece by talking about a Facebook experiment where users were told they were being locked out of Facebook until they could prove that they were legitimate users and human beings. Can you tell us about that story, that experiment that they did? He should do a story on Skype and how it constantly freezes up. Yeah. All right, we're gonna. Right, yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get him back in just a sec. Anthony's working on that. So let me ask you a question, Jules. Now, this whole Facebook's experiment story, where essentially they were tweaking the news feeds of users, a small number of users for a short period of time, just a week, and this happened about two years ago. They tried to affect the moods of people by altering whether they would get primarily positive or primarily negative items in their news feeds to see if people would then turn around and post either positively or negatively. They concluded that, in fact, mood is contagious, that positive posts lead to more positive posts, and so on. And it's been very, very controversial. Now, Jules Polonetsky, do you think that the outcry over this story is overblown? Are people making a big deal out of nothing, or is this a serious issue?
Look, clearly this struck a real nerve. But I think it would be a mistake, not to, recognize why was Facebook doing this? There was a meme, I guess, going around a couple of years ago that we all actually got depressed when we saw all the fun things our friends were doing on Facebook because we weren't having as glamorous lives. And so, clearly the purpose of this experiment was to actually understand what the effect of seeing these sorts of things are. And so that's actually, kind of interesting, whether or not it was the right thing to do. Clearly, given the reaction and the deep nerve that it hit, not. But I think it would be a mistake to solely look at this as is this particular experiment by Facebook the right one, right? It's clear that there are thousands of experiments probably going on right now by companies that provide products and services to us. Increasingly, this is more than, did you click on an ad that was targeted? It is, does this service, which maybe is intended to track my fitness, maybe is intended to help me be more efficient, how does it perform? How do we make it work better? Or are there things we can learn about the world? So we're entering this incredible world where I think users haven't, and philosophers and academics and all of us who think about policy haven't sat back well enough and said, oh my goodness, what is the effect of a world where companies are personalizing things for us, testing, understanding our behavior, conducting almost every day these giant experiments, whether it's to make their service better or whether it's to discover new things. And how do we want that to work? I mean, these are clearly not government-run experiments that are subject to these very specific oversight boards. What do we want from a world where our search results are different, the ads we see are different, the content we see is different, our interactions with our friends are different? We need a model, and Facebook, I think, exposed it, but we need to sit back and actually figure out what we want for the future of how data is being used.
Do you think, as I actually tend to think, Jules, that there's a difference between companies that do experiments, A/B testing, or change people's moods? For example, commercial might be intended to make you feel good, feel happy about McDonald's or whatever the commercial is for. Is there a difference between that sort of activity on the one hand and activity that Facebook is involved with here that actually affects what your relationships are? I mean, we all know that many of our relationships, whether it's with old high school classmates or former coworkers or extended relatives, take place exclusively on Facebook. And Facebook has the power to terminate relationships for all intents and purposes, or to enhance them, or to change the tenor of them based on how they do newsfeed filtering. And here they're taking that enormous power and possibly being irresponsible with it, with a small number of people, for the sake of an experiment that has not been exposed or explained until recently. Is that different when they're actually in charge of the nature of our relationships to a certain extent?
Clearly, if there was a board of ethicists or lawyers or policymakers or sociologists who were sitting and who were being exposed to these decisions, clearly this is one where we hope people would say, you know what, this one is a big mistake, let's not do this. But I can think of another one that Facebook did where everyone seemed all excited about it. And in some ways, it's maybe as sensitive, right? They had a campaign to encourage organ donation, which is a hugely, impactful thing for individuals and society. And they pushed out, if you shared that you had just signed up to pledge to donate an organ, they gave that priority so that your friends were more likely to see it and therefore more likely to be influenced by it. And so, you can see hundreds of these decisions. Some of them, I don't know, I guess that's a pretty good one. Nobody got upset by that. It seems like there's a no loss, although, again, that's a pretty personal decision. This one where, oh my God, they're interfering. But, imagine this. I just noticed the other day that a friend of mine had breast cancer, and she had been posting about this on Facebook. And I never saw it. And for months, she'd been posting, and I never saw it. And I assume it's because people were not liking this, right? You feel a bit awkward. Someone posts some bad news. Do you like it? And obviously, we shouldn't only be seeing the happy stories that we click on. How does Facebook figure out which things that we don't click on we might want to see, but we might be a little less likely to like because it's bad news, right? I mean, the nuance of how this algorithm works and how it's going to actually influence people to pay more attention to their friends who have problems, every decision that they make is potentially fraught with ethical concern. This one's an obvious one. Some others, hey, who cares? It's testing who clicks on an ad. But there are going to be hundreds of decisions that Facebook makes and that Google makes and that Microsoft makes, and frankly, even small app developers who maybe, what is Fitbit doing with how it designs its tools that encourage me to exercise? I mean, we want people exercising, so I guess it's good for them to experiment, but I don't know, what if Fitbit learns that people who share, that they ran a marathon, that depresses most people because I'm not going to run a marathon. But people who share that they've done modest exercise, I mean, what are the boundaries? So we need boards of ethical process. I was a chief privacy officer many years ago when that role was first created at DoubleClick. And my job was to try to figure out not only what was legal, but what are the responsible things that we should or shouldn't be doing? Mm-hmm. Maybe we shouldn't create a profile. Hey, this guy looks like he might want some Viagra because of the kind of websites he's looking at, right? That seems kind of really creepy. Let's not do it. When I was the chief privacy officer at AOL, I had to make content decisions. Do we want this much nakedness on the home screen, or is it a little bit over? And now that these decisions are all in the hands of companies, and these decisions affect free expression, they affect whether Google should take down search results or whether the public has the right to know these search results because of the public interest. Companies are going to have to figure out, and I think we need to urge them to have internal processes where we can be confident that people with a broad view are really looking at these things and making the right decisions that are good for the company and good for society.
And Jules, I'm glad you're taking this broader, because obviously Facebook isn't the only company that has the power to manipulate our moods and our emotions. And for as long as advertising and PR have been around, they have manipulated our emotions. So when you talk about sort of or call for a set of standards or a way for us to think about this is an important moment. What should the large, I mean, besides outrage, which has been sort of the reaction we've seen, and then backlash to the outrage that we're now getting into a cycle of, what is the way that that you recommend that smart thinkers about this, or those of us who are now, or the members of the public who are now sort of awakened to this topic, how should they react? What is the that will come out of this revelation in particular, and others that Reed broke this morning?
Well, the bad thing that could come out of this, and I think unfortunately will come out of this, is that there's always been a tension between academic research and company research. The academic community is sitting by and is seeing substantial, incredible research. Nobel Prize winners being hired to work internally at companies to do research that might improve the service or might be of incredible interest to the world. How do we cure diseases? How do we actually understand human behavior in some ways? And if that's now going to be hidden work done by super scientists who are solely focused on improving a product and not doing pure research anymore, not trying to actually figure out the effects of social media on contagion, we'll lose this knowledge to the world. And I think we want this knowledge. Some of this may inform some of the most important science that's out there. Or we'll have people only doing work that improves their product. So I'd like to see more transparency. I mean, I'd like Facebook to say, you know what, we're going to now be careful. We're going to vet this. We're not going to make these decisions willy-nilly, but we're going to continue to publish. We're going to continue to make sure that it's not junk science. Hey, Twitter says this. Trust the results. That this is really good for the world.
And you nailed one of the problems here, which is that Facebook claims that improving the product is the sole purpose of all of this stuff, and that's kind of their fig leaf in all of this, because they're not really getting genuine informed consent. They basically have this privacy user policy that everybody agrees to when they sign up for Facebook, which hardly anybody reads, and those who do read it barely remember it, probably. And so they're saying, hey, this is all about improving the service. This isn't about benefiting mankind or doing any sort of weird research. But as we're going to hear from Reed Albergotti here, who went into some detail on this in his story, they do lots of things, and it's not necessarily part of a larger organized policy. It tends to be more willy-nilly. Now, Reed Albergotti, if you're joining us now, you opened your piece by talking about a Facebook experiment where users were told they were being locked out of Facebook until they could prove that they were both human beings and also legitimate users. Can you tell us about that experiment?
Well, again, that experiment was designed to improve the Facebook product. They have these anti-fraud measures, and sometimes real people, legitimate users, are caught up in the anti-fraud measures. So what Facebook was doing here, they wanted to see how people reacted to this when a real legitimate user gets knocked off the service. All those people were ultimately let back in, but some of them had to actually send in government IDs to Facebook. And I just thought this was a fascinating look. This research was never studied. It was never talked about publicly, but I think it's an example of the kind of stuff that happens every day within Facebook, and data scientists are working on these types of projects. And I think what this, this big controversy that erupted over the weekend does is it gives us an opportunity to take a closer look at some of the things that Facebook does that users, most people, had no idea was going on. I mean, it's really fascinating. And, I think we'll learn more in the coming days. And Facebook will probably, they've said they're working on potentially changing their policies because of all the negative feedback they've gotten.
So just to frame this situation, I'm sorry, Elise, just to frame this situation, just for clarity, to drive up the ethical issue here, Facebook, knowing that people were legitimate users and that were humans, lied and said, we don't know that you're legitimate users, we don't know if you're human, so please go through this process because we want to test something. They're essentially falsifying information. And that's related to a question we got from a Tech News Today fan who wrote an email to us. His name is Kevin Berg, and he points out that the Facebook terms of service allow the use of personal data, but they don't grant permission for the manipulation or falsification of data for the purpose of research. And he asked if those are two different things. So are these ethical issues the sort of either the manipulation of data as opposed to the mere use of data, and also the kind of falsification or the putting up a false front for the purpose of this research? Is there an ethical line to be drawn there, Reed?
Well, I think you're talking about a legal question, and the terms of service may not be clear enough right now to answer that legal question. We'll see if there's any litigation that comes out of this. But there are certainly ethical implications to all of this. And I think that's really what Facebook has to address. Right now, it's a huge public relations issue. And there are academics calling for a separate terms of service for research being conducted. So, if you're going to be included in a research pool, you have to give a separate permission and then be debriefed on the research that you were included in afterwards. I don't know if that's feasible just looking at the volume of research that Facebook's doing on a daily basis.
Reed, from your reporting, is there evidence that what Facebook is doing in terms of research on its billion-plus users is more significant, or does it conduct more research that raises ethical questions than, say, LinkedIn or Google or other companies that we opt into?
Oh, I mean, I think Facebook, by its nature, raises more ethical questions than any other research, both because of the volume, like you said, almost 1.3 billion users around the world, and also because of the nature of the information that we're all giving to Facebook every day. Very personal information about our relationships, our friends and family, our recreational activities, our social lives, our dating lives. All of that information is hugely valuable to social science researchers. And I think both because Facebook's, seems to be more willing than some other companies to share that and publish that research, and also just because it's so personal, they are really being singled out here. But certainly they're not the only company doing research on human data.
And Jules, I have another question for you just in a sec, but I want to ask Reed Albergotti one more question, and that is, Reed, if you could please characterize the way that these research projects come about. It's not really an organized process, is it? And to a certain extent, researchers are given enormous latitude and freedom to choose what the project is, to choose how it's carried out. They can go ahead and just carry it out, and then later on they can publish the study or whatever. But can you characterize what that general process is, or what we know about that decision-making process for these studies?
Well, the process has evolved, according to Facebook, over the last couple of years. When this controversial study was conducted, a former data scientist at the company went on the record with us and talked about it, and he said there really was no oversight, and they could really do whatever research they wanted to do. And obviously that may have gotten them into hot water here. But over time, and since the beginning of this year, they have had some oversight. Now, Facebook hasn't really shared with us all the details of that oversight. They haven't, told us who is on these oversight committees. It seems like there are two of them, one that looks at all the research and another that looks at specifically academic research. And so we're really pressing them. We're trying to get those questions answered. Who are these people? What is the actual process like? And I think that the process will change in the coming weeks or months as they review all of the feedback they've gotten.
Interesting. Now, Jules Polonetsky, what would you advise Facebook, or what would you advise for this board that you suggested for what the boundaries are for companies like Facebook in the doing of research? For example, should they be allowed to lie? Should they be allowed to make people upset? I think that's called trolling, actually, when other people do it. What should the rules or boundaries be for research when conducted by companies that own social networks?
Well, to say that there's a automatic, easy, one-size-fits answer for that, I think would be would be irresponsible. I think the novel notion, and this is an idea that Professor Ryan Calo at the University of Washington was one of the first to champion, was to say, look, we have these IRBs, and they're not perfect, but we have a long history of a formal process that we have respect and appreciation for, at least when it works right. Obviously, it was a bit awkward about how it actually worked here or not. How do you take that same notion and move it to the private sector, where you have issues like confidentiality and patent issues and profit motives, but inventing that notion and building it into corporate governance? And I've seen Facebook evolve. We've been working with them for, say, 5 or 6 years now, from having one person to having sort of teams that oversee this as they've grown. And I think they have an opportunity here to lead and to say, you know what, we stepped in it here. We made a mistake. This was not the right kind of test to do. But there are an incredible number of experiments that we want to do. Some of it is to improve the service. Some of it is to work with academics and try to find solutions to the world's problems. You've got people at Google. You've got people at Microsoft. We've got people who are doing this across the tech sector. Here's a model for a committee that will think these things through. And, hey, does this have any physical effect on people? Does this have an emotional effect? Do the benefits outweigh the risks, right? Are we claiming here we're going to cure cancer if we can do this test? By doing this test, are we going to improve our spam blocking by 1,000%? And then what's the impact on the users? How many people are we inconveniencing? And so there are models, and IRBs in general, these internal review boards at in the academic world, have dealt with them and struggled. And even if they're wrong every so often, because sometimes this is a very subjective thing, knowing that there are sober people who are thinking about more than, hey, will this work? Will this make us money? I think is likely to give a level of comfort. So I'd like to see them do more to build out this board that they have, this internal process, include maybe some external people. And I'd like them and others to not shy away and pull this research back. That'll be the real tragedy. More transparency and actually formalizing this new idea of a consumer subject review board. That ought to be the model that companies have. I
agree, and I think that Facebook should also give more control to the users so that they can turn on and off different types of algorithm filtering, and also opt out completely of any research if they choose to do so. I think that'd be really nice. Well, Reid Albergotti is at WSJ.com and on Twitter at Reid Albergotti. And I want to thank you, Reid, for coming on the show today and talking about your piece.
Thanks for having me. Hope the data connection's faster next time.
Okay, it comes and goes, and there's nothing anyone can do about it, apparently. And Jules Polonetsky is on Twitter at Jules Polonetsky. And, of course, again, he is the Executive Director of the Future of Privacy Forum. Thank you so much, Jules, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, just a sec.
Mike, I'm glad.
Go ahead, Elise. Go ahead.
I was just saying that I was glad that Jules brought up the ideas of free expression and privacy, because that ties into a lot of the things that our next story is about. But I didn't want to jump on you there. So,
well,
Mike, go ahead.
Hold on to that story. I'm going to do a quick ad. We'll take a break. I'll do an ad, and then we'll come back and talk about your story, which suggests trouble ahead for the internet. It's not the happiest story we've ever reported, but we'll get to that in just a sec. Right now, we're going to do an ad for Personal Capital, one of our sponsors today. Now, Personal Capital will solve two of your problems. This is a free and secure tool for your financial life, to get your financial life in order. And the two problems that it solves is first, it's very difficult to keep track of all your financial information, your stocks, your 401k, bank accounts, all the different financial related accounts you have all over the internet. How do you get a clear view of what's going on with your money? And the second problem they solve is that you're probably paying someone to manage your money, and you're probably paying way more than you need to. Personal Capital brings all your accounts and assets onto one single screen. You plug in all your different accounts, and it all comes into one place, so you can get an intuitive grasp of your entire financial world. It also shows you how much you're overpaying in fees, and helps you reduce those fees. You'll get tailored advice on optimizing your investment. No need to wait. Signing up takes just a minute, pays big dividends. Personal Capital gives you total clarity and transparency to make better investment decisions, and that happens right away. To set up your free account, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. Personal Capital is free and the smart way to grow your money. Just go to personalcapital.com/TNT. And we thank them for their support of tech news today. And I'd also like to mention that a little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking briefly about the new Android Wear apps, and Personal Capital is one of them. Their Android app supports Android Wear. So that is very cool. So, Elise, what's going on with the future of the internet? It looks pretty grim, doesn't it?
Well, doesn't look great according to the 1,400 plus leaders and thinkers in tech that responded to Pew Research Center's recent survey. So Pew has just released this morning its results from its study into the future of the internet, what it would look like and how it'll work in 2025. And then the general consensus, a few main themes that I outline here on NPR's All Tech Considered blog. That public trust in the internet is evaporating, that over time the internet's going to be more and more controlled by governments, and commercial pressures from companies like Facebook, of course, mean more walled gardens on the web. So what we see and our choice in what we see becomes more and more limited. Mike, does any of this surprise you?
Not really. I mean, we covered the different parts of the elephant on different news shows. They come up in isolation. For example, we've been talking about the European. We will also, in a few minutes, talk additionally about the European right to be forgotten. That's one example of a very free and democratic part of the world actually crafting its own rules for that, how the internet works, and essentially it's censorship that doesn't exist outside that area. And then you have despotic regimes, you have heavy censoring governments like the Chinese government. You have all kinds of political and religious objections. You have countries banning different social sites, like Turkey banning Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and so on. And it just keeps turning up and up and up. And of course, there was the Canadian case where a Canadian judge ruled that Google, no other search engine, just Google, was required to eliminate all links and references to a specific company now in perpetuity into the future and for the entire world. This didn't affect just Canada. They ordered Google to block this worldwide. And that kind of those kinds of trend lines, plus the list that you mentioned that I didn't mention, all sort of are leading to this eventual result, which Pew talked about and which you wrote about on NPR.org, and it's not a good result when you look at it globally, especially. I mean, you can understand, yeah, you have an authoritarian regime somewhere, and yeah, they're going to have censorship on the internet. That's terrible. But then when you look at the global and cumulative effect of all these different factors on the entire global internet, it's not the internet that we once imagined it to be.
Right, and the people who are fighting the fight, in fact, admit they're probably losing. I interviewed not too long ago the executive director of Mozilla Foundation, so the foundation side of Mozilla Corporation, and he said, "Listen, there's a small number of us that are fighting for these principles. We've come out with this with our version of a phone OS, but it's not getting picked up in the same way that Android and iOS is, and so." It's questionable whether the next billion who come online, maybe on mobile only, will be able to sort of see beyond the walled garden that Android presents it or Apple presents it. And it kind of ties into our earlier segment, Mike, which is the idea that Facebook sort of limits what you get to see about other people's personal lives or things that you might want to see about your friends. So it raises this question of the promise of the internet originally, which is sort of make anything and share it widely. And who really gets to share it? How fast is that? How fast are the connections for various types of content? And it sounds like, especially with net neutrality here in the U.S., just to turn to net neutrality briefly, that there's a marketing problem. John Oliver, in fact, said the only two more boring words than net neutrality are featuring Sting.
Yeah, here in the U.S., you're in Jamaica. Just look out across the water, and you will know that for sure. Well, that was a great piece, and everybody should read it on npr.org. I really enjoyed it. You really boiled down a whole lot of data into a very concise accounting of what they reported and what's going on there. So I enjoyed reading it, and that was great stuff. Everybody should read that. Well, Paul Thurrott, writing on a super site for Windows, reported today that Microsoft's upcoming smartwatch will be a fitness band similar to the Samsung Gear Fit, but that it also displays smartphone notifications, a kind of hybrid device that looks like a fitness band, but with some of the features of a smartwatch. That actually sounds like a good approach. The report is based on unnamed sources who also said what previous reports have revealed, which is that it will work not only with Windows phones, but also iPhones and Android phones. Thurrott is a host of Twit's Windows Weekly Show, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. In other smartwatch news, Google posted Android Wear apps on the Google Play Store in a new section devoted to that platform. There are now 23 Android Wear apps on the Play Store. In most cases, these appear to be updates to existing Android smartphone apps, such as Google Maps and Google Hangouts, as well as third-party apps like IFTTT and the American Airlines app, which have been updated with explicit support for Android Wear wrist watches. Are you excited, Elise Hugh, about the smart watch revolution? Are you expecting to be wearing one anytime soon?
I'm interested to see how this plays out. I'm not an early adopter of any smartwatch. And Mike, you were at Google I/O last week, so I'm curious whether you tried out the UX, because there have been lots of questions about smartwatches and whether it's sort of the right size for our wrists, and what sort of functions we might use a smartwatch for instead of just reaching into a pocket or always having a phone in our hands, which is the case for many of us users. So talk to me a little bit about the UX of Android Wear and how that's working for you.
It's a bit controversial because, we were talking about how Facebook kind of removes control about exactly what you see in your news feed. It's algorithmically generated, and Android Wear is kind of like that. It's not like a smartphone user interface where you go and you see all your apps with little icons, and you open an app, and within that app you can do all the things the app maker has enabled you to do. It's not like that at all. The notifications come in, and if you accidentally swipe it away, there's no way to get it back until it comes back on its own again. There's no way to determine the order that things are in. So, for example, when you bring up the user interface and you decide to just go through the existing current live, I guess you would call it, notifications, you can just go through that, and they're in some order that has been determined by some algorithm or something like that, and there's nothing you can do about that. And so it's really it's not an interface that gives you enormous control. You can set up notifications, of course. You do all of that on the smartphone, and you can make a lot of tweaks about what's going to happen. But once stuff starts coming to your watch, you don't have lots of control. Now, that is a feature, not a bug, because the whole point of this thing is to be kind of googly and Google Now-ish. So it's kind of, it's
contextually aware.
Exactly. And it gives you random things. Oh, one of your favorite shows is coming up on the TV. It's Google Now. So it's in addition to notifications from apps. It's also a little confusing, I think, to early adopters because of the fact that Google, it's impossible to tell the difference between a Google Now app notification and a regular notification. It'll send every notification that you get from your smartphone to your watch, and you can only tell when you try to do something with it. So a regular smartphone notification that ends up on the watch, you can't do anything with it. You can't reply from that interface. You can't do the same things you can do with an app that's explicitly designed for Android Wear. So that's a little confusing, but on the whole, the Google Now user interface is fantastic, I think, for a wristwatch. And the smartwatch idea is, you really feel it when you start wearing one. It's one of those things, like the iPad, I guess, like the multi-touch user interface when Apple introduced it to most of us in 2007. You really get it when you try it. And so I'm certain now, more than ever, that smartwatches are going to be here to stay. Pretty much we're all going to have them because they are really compelling. And I think they're going to be completely mainstream within a year or two. It's going to be quite a huge and fast cultural change from nobody wearing a watch to pretty much everybody wearing a smartwatch.
Well, I'll put it this way. I would rather wear, in terms of wearables, I'd rather have something on my wrist than on my face. So I'm more likely to be an Android watch wearer than a Google Glass wearer. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I'm going to take another break very quickly. Actually, you know what? Why don't we talk about the world of television? We're losing an old friend today, aren't we? In the world of TV.
We have a bit of an obituary, Mike. For our final segment today, we're bidding farewell to the plasma TV. It's actually not that old of an invention. It's one of the last remaining makers of this, which is a division of Samsung, announced, as you can see on the screen there for those of you watching, announced it's going to stop producing plasma televisions in November. The reason, of course, poor demand. They were once cool and once touted as next generation televisions. This is in the early aughts. So it's been more than a decade now, but LCD TVs quickly surpassed them. Plasma is now no more. So goodbye, plasma TVs. Yeah. I don't even think I went to that. I took that iteration. I just skipped from the traditional cathode ray TV, the big boxy one, to a flat screen, and my flat screen was an LCD.
Yeah, I think that's true.
What are your memories? Any memories, special memories of plasma TV?
I've seen many demos. I've never owned a plasma TV. I've seen lots of demos. They always blow you away with the demos. Of course, LCDs are thinner, cooler, they're more power efficient, they're cheaper. Those are big reasons why they're more popular with users. But plasma ultimately is better. And Samsung, it's really bad that Samsung is cutting its plasma production. I believe that LG will continue to produce plasma TVs for a little while, but really nobody's buying them, and it's just a matter of probably weeks or months before they make a similar announcement. But Samsung's F8500 TV is probably the best TV ever. I mean, this is a fantastic, beautiful television, just with deep blacks and really good, high contrast, perfect colors. It's really a great, TV, and you know what? You can still buy them. For a little while. They're still stocked in various places. Samsung isn't going to make them anymore. So if you want the world's best TV, you better rush out and get them. Now, by the way, another reason why LCDs are kind of preferable to plasma in this new era is that it's very difficult, according to some reports, for manufacturers to create 4K plasma TVs. It can be done, but it's a very difficult process. And so I think, you know, consumers aren't buying them, and manufacturers are like, you know what, this is too hard anyway. Let's just forget the whole thing and stick with the LCDs.
Yeah, as we say in Texas, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Thank you, Texas. You're always good for a great phrase. You Texans and your colorful language. Well, in just a sec, we're going to do a quick follow-up about Europe's right to be forgotten controversy. But I want to tell you about ZipRecruiter. If you hire people, I've hired many people in my career, probably hundreds of people, and I've come to believe over the years that the very biggest decision you're ever going to make in your career, if you're a hiring manager or if you own a small company, is who you hire. And also who you don't hire. You don't want to hire the wrong person. You want to hire the right person. And if you hire the best people, you're going to have a successful company. And ZipRecruiter is here to help you do exactly that. And the way they do that is they enable you to post your job information to 50+ job sites all at once with a single click. You can also post them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And just cast this enormously wide net so that because you never know where the best candidates are. They could be anywhere, and ZipRecruiter will put you everywhere so you can make sure that you get the right person. Of course, you're going to get flooded back with lots of candidates, many of whom are not going to be great candidates, and ZipRecruiter helps you there as well. They'll filter the results for you and surface the qualified candidates, roll them up into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use user interface so you can just go in there, go after the most qualified candidates, and you don't have to worry about the less qualified ones because ZipRecruiter will help you filter them out. Try ZipRecruiter and find out why they've been used by more than 100,000 businesses. Right now, our viewers and listeners can try ZipRecruiter, and for a free 4-day trial, just go to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT, and we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today. Well, the Guardian newspaper's Chris Moran wrote an interesting piece about the ongoing right to be forgotten controversy. We talked about it yesterday on Twig, which I was fortunate enough to host in Leo's absence, if you want to check that out. It was a really interesting discussion, mostly because of the brilliant insights by Jeff Jarvis on that show. But as a recap, the European Union recently ruled that European citizens have the right to ask search engines, you know, like Google, to remove links from their search index, and that Google and other companies must comply if certain criteria are met. Now, Moran's piece emphasized misleading journalism around the issue. The most important fact, he clarified, is that the ruling requires not that an article or page is removed from their index, but that a search for a person's name not return specific results. A different search using different keywords still returns the links as it normally would. In other words, this is about the use of a person's name as a search query. It's not about removing a page or an article from the index and so that it can't be searched under any circumstances. Now, Europeans, of course, can easily use Google.com instead of localized European versions of Google to get around the limitation. And I think, and I predict, that increasingly better educated Europeans are going to do exactly that because it's so easy to do. And, you know, the European version of Google and other search engines will be increasingly compromised by this decision, and they're going to have this kind of highly, it's going to be hard to, you know, you're never going to trust results when you search for a person's name in Europe because you don't know if they've, if you're going to get all the results because of this ruling. Now, 9 to 5 Google highlights the unintended consequences of all the reporting around this issue, namely something called the Streisand effect. When high-level people invoke the right to be forgotten, that request itself can be widely reported, making everyone remember what had already been forgotten. It's called the Streisand effect because singer and actress Barbra Streisand complained in 2003 about the inclusion of her Malibu beach house in a database of aerial photos of the California coastline. Before her complaint, nobody noticed her house. Afterwards, millions of people went actually looking for it in the database, and now we are showing her house on Tech News Today for the great masses to see. Now, nobody would have ever known that that was even Barbra Streisand's house. I
actually thought the same thing about the Spanish guy who filed the lawsuit, that started this whole thing and then ended in the court ruling. Before, people didn't know he was in debt, and now everybody knows there was a Spanish guy in debt who didn't want his past debts to show up on top of Google, and now everyone knows it. So same Streisand effect there.
Yeah, not only in Spain, but across the world, everybody knows this guy is a big debtor. I mean, right. It's just, it's awful. And, you know, it's hit or miss with some of these, some of the people, you know, the thousands of requests are being filed all the time. So the vast majority of people are not going to be exposed to the public. But the higher level the person is, the more prominent they are, the more likely the Streisand effect is going to take place, and that you know, that this is just going to be huge news that will never be expunged from the internet, just multiplying the references to whatever it is they're trying to erase. So do it carefully if you're a famous or notable person, because it could really backfire. And, you know, who wants to be like Barbra Streisand? Of course, I wouldn't mind having the Streisand effect if I could live in that house. Right, exactly. Right. Look at that house. That is nice. And that's in Malibu, too, a very exclusive neighborhood. Well, that is the tech news today. Elise, Hugh, when you're back into the United States, where can people find your work?
You can find my work at npr.org. I blog at All Tech Considered, and I'm on our national programs. All right. Well, thank you for making us all intensely jealous of your lovely time in Jamaica there. And thank you for coming on the show, even though you're in a very beautiful and relaxing place where you probably have other things you could be doing that are very pleasant. So thanks again, and we'll see you next Thursday. See you next Thursday. All right. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, Yahoo RSS, or many other options. You can choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. And please follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Tech News Today TV. And please join our Google Plus community and also circle our page. Just search Google Plus for Tech News Today. We're big Google Plus fans here at Tech News Today, and we read every word that you post there when it's referencing the show. And we want to hear from you. Please send us email at tnt@twit.tv or leave us voicemail by calling 260-TNT-SHOW. And don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. Now, tomorrow is Independence Day here in the United States, so we won't be recording a Friday show. We wish all of our American fans a fantastic 4th of July. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you Monday.